Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Monday night, early Monday evening out here, about 5:09 p.m. That's California time, January 20th, 2025 is the date. Latest activity shows some continued movement up here across the Seattle area, up in Washington. Latest quake, a 3.0, just coming in across the eastern side here of the Seattle fault zone. Earlier today, a 3.5 came into the same region. So we got ourselves a little bit of swarming going on now across this area, and of course, it's a little concerning because this region here is very capable of producing a large, damaging earthquake, up to a 7.5 magnitude earthquake level. And the worst part is that this fault system runs directly underneath Seattle, underneath the downtown area, and across. As you can see here on the map, the Seattle fault zone is no joke. I think it's been a little while since we've seen anything of this magnitude. Now, looking at the past 30 days, shows some previous earthquake activity over here across the western edge. Got about 3 earthquakes of some 1 magnitude level. But far as, up there in terms of magnitude level, it's today's event kind of tops the cake here. Far as historical activity, at least in the last 30 days. Now, a little bit of information here from the Seattle.gov emergency management website, talking a little bit about the Seattle fault system here, and some key points that they pointed out here. An earthquake on the Seattle fault poses the greatest risk to Seattle. And I've said this a number of times, more so than, say, for example, a 9-pointer on the Cascadia due to proximity, right? If you think about it, the Seattle fault runs directly underneath Seattle. Cascadia fault way over here, about 100 miles or so west of Seattle area. Now, even though we'd have a 9-pointer across this area, which would do a lot of shaking and subsequent tsunami, the effects would not be as harsh, I should say, as a 7.5 underneath the Seattle area due to proximity. Similar to the Puente Hills thrust fault that runs underneath Los Angeles in comparison to the San Andreas fault at a distance. So 7.5 is what they're stating. They're thinking maybe a 7-pointer is more probable, but depending on how much time has passed, how much built-up strain, we could see upwards of a 7.5 underneath the Seattle area, which would completely squash that region, unfortunately. The most recent Seattle fault, check this out. Last Seattle fault earthquake was about 1,100 years ago. That's a lot of time that has passed, folks. So even if the slip rate is extremely slow there, that time period means that we could be getting close here to another one. The Seattle fault has been active about 3 or 4 times in the past 3,000 years. So go figure, right? Talking about 3 earthquakes. Say we'll just use the minimal we'll do 3, exclude the 4. So that would be an earthquake every 1,000 years or so, right? Here we are 1,100 years ago since the last big earthquake there. And this is just one area around the planet. I've been saying this a lot. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of elevated large-scale earthquake activity here soon. Let me go back here and search the earthquake catalog, see what we've had in terms of we can go 2.5. I just want to look here throughout the last couple years. We'll go back to 2020. That was 5 years ago? Goodness. Yikes. Time is just flying by when you're having fun. So the Seattle fault, specifically up here, runs something like that. Just want to cover strictly just the Seattle area. Let's see what we have here. It is in an area, if I remember right, it was a couple years ago we had some further activity out here, 2023. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. I remember covering this on one of my update videos of some increasing earthquake activity out here in the region of the Seattle fault. So today's activity within that same region, 3.9 struck back here in 2023. And that was involved in a little earthquake swarm as well, with a number of 2s in there back in August of 2023. Some further activity in 2024 last year, a little 2.6. But hey, we didn't have any big earthquakes then, right? Well, we can't be complacent in that thought. That train of thought right there will leave everyone surprised when the big one does hit up here. We have to pay attention to the ever-increasing earthquake activity around the region here. There's a little swarm out there, west side of the Seattle fault zone. Bunch of threes back there in 2020, and then more so back in 2024. 3-pointer and 2.6 and the 2.7 there. So this area, even though it's somewhat centered just off here to the east, that's where they have the line drawn out. It is in a linear type fashion here that leads me to believe that it's still connected to the Seattle fault. And again, that's a very hazardous area, and with the time frame there of earthquakes happening on the Seattle fault, that's a lot of time that has passed. So it could be getting close to that. The estimated frequency of a Seattle fault earthquake is difficult to determine due to lack of data. Estimated reoccurrence intervals range from every 200 to 15,000 years. But down here, they state the Seattle fault has been active about 3 or 4 times in the past 3,000 years. So they know, due to, they can probably check the faults and see how they've moved, if you dig down below the surface there and get a time frame. But at 15,000 years, that'd be some good time frame, right? We're not even anywhere near that since the last one. But if you look back here on the statement that they make here, 3 or 4 times in the past 3,000 years, that would tell us right here that the time period is just due, if not overdue, in terms of a big earthquake out here. So I guess we'll see. Either way, earthquake activity is ramping up out here. It was felt. This 3.5 was felt here throughout the region. I'll show you guys the did you feel it map. Looks like, mainly across the Seattle area, Redmond region, it looks like, down to Kent, maybe down here across the Tacoma area. But that's not a big earthquake. It's a 3.5. And similar to the earthquakes that we've seen here over the last couple years, it's letting us know that this fault system here is very much alive. It's not a dead fault. Similar to the New Madrid seismic zone over there. We'll see another big earthquake out here eventually as that continues to show earthquake activity. So we'll continue to watch that, folks. Definitely, it's got some potential for sure. It's been pretty active out here today in the earthquake world. A lot of activity stirring up out here across this region of the planet. A lot of strain reinforcing the strain out here across this region of the Nankai Trough. A lot of earthquake activity stirring up here in Taiwan today with a 6-pointer. Also a couple other smaller quakes in there as well. Shortly after, we had some further activity up north here around the Japan Trench. Now we got some further activity here. The recent one, a 5.0, around the northern Mariana Islands. All these earthquakes encircling this area, I should say, in terms of built-up strain. This is where we would expect a lot of strain to build up following all these earthquake movements, the pressure transfer out here. That region of the Nankai Trough area is pretty much a crunch zone region where all the plates tend to point at in terms of the GPS directional arrows. It's going to be this area right here, the Nankai Trough. That can see some earthquakes here on very soon. It could definitely be on the calendar here very soon for earthquake activity. The last one was back in 1944 with a partial rupture of a couple different segments. Prior to that, a full rupture back in 1857 that produced a mega quake out here. And there's a little concern of a 9-pointer if there's enough time and strain built up out here. Either way, say a mid-8 would definitely do some damage, and a subsequent tsunami as well across that subduction zone. And all if you look at all the earthquake activity out here recently, it puts this region in a prime zone to watch. A lot of swarming out here, specifically on the southern end, towards the southern end of the Nankai Trough. This 5.5 is in a region that has been seeing a little bit of earthquake activity, right? Including a 6.8 this year. That's about 22 miles deep. No adjustment down here, but got to remember when the other areas of the plate here move, it's just not cracking this whole area and making a new plate boundary. It's adding further strain and stress out here against the Kumano Ridge, the Nankai Trough zone. And that's where our big quake could happen at any given time now. There's a lot going on north, east, west, all putting this area right in a prime spot here for some big-time movement soon. Back in, I think it was August of last year, there was a big earthquake swarm out here in the same region that the 6.8 struck, and not today, but when was this? The 14th, so a 5.5 struck there a few days ago. Anyway, back in 2024, there was a pretty good earthquake swarm with some big-time earthquake activity involved as well. And the Japanese government here put out a mega quake warning, increased the likelihood of a mega quake occurring, first ever, on the Nankai Trough area, a major subduction zone out here, because of all the elevated activity that was happening down south here. But now we got it all over the place here, leaving this area absent of earthquake activity. And is it building up some steam, let me tell you. I think there was a little earthquake out there today. Let me check here real quick. Yeah, there was actually one that was observed here across the subduction zone, kind of at the, somewhat deep, 40 kilometers deep here, for a 3.6. That was at 1. That was at 1:20 today's date, 1300. So that was this morning, roughly about the time here that we were watching earthquake activity bounce back and forth over that region between Taiwan and areas up north here. So I'm telling you, that is an area to watch pretty closely here. I think at any given time we could see that. I do have a couple different seismograph stations over there. Got one around the Philippines south of the area, Japan right here. Nothing showing up on that right now, but I'm telling you guys, watch this area. It's it's right there in the zone of where things are compacting and stressing due to all the elevated earthquake activity around it. The pressure being applied against this region is quite enormous. And if you look in general across this entire area, this whole region is way more amplified than normal out here. I got the swarm out in Taiwan, elevated activity across the Himalayas. China been seeing a lot of earthquake activity, Andaman Sea, and that's just what the USGS is showing. If you look here on the earthquake 3D globe, it's pretty obvious. We got some major development going on across this region, and guess what sits there in that little quiet zone? There's that little 3-pointer that struck, but right there in the kind of in the middle of 3 separate sections here is that Nankai Trough. But in general, a whole lot of elevated activity out here. Got to watch it. Something is brewing big time across this area of the planet. Older activity down south here across the Vanuatu. A swarm of activity there across the Hikurangi subduction zone in New Zealand. That's another area where things could get pretty nasty in terms of earthquake activity, large-scale potential. Bring up the GeoNet servers here real quick. Got a pretty good swarm going on here off the North Island area. Let's bring up the all magnitudes here real quick. Let's see what we got. Hopefully that's not too many. A lot of deeper activity, 62 kilometers deep for that 2.3 today, about an hour ago. And at that depth is going to be associated with the Hikurangi subduction zone. There's another one there at the northern edge of the Hikurangi. A couple of them actually here in the last 24 hours. This one's right at the let's see, we'll go back here. This is going to be just probably right off. Well, it's offshore, obviously, but that's going to be this region right here. So it's right here. at the interface of the Pacific Plate, where the Pacific Plate subducts underneath this region. This region down here, this is a Hikurangi subduction zone where the two arrows are pointing. So you got the Pacific Plate subducting underneath the Australia Plate here in general. There's obviously some other fault systems that run separate from the Hikurangi, the Alpine Fault in the areas down south here. But this specific region, the Hikurangi, is New Zealand's sleeping giant. There's definitely been a lot of earthquake activity out here in the last few months, pointing towards that thing potentially waking up out here. And that can produce up to an 8-point, well, some models say a 9-pointer, 8.5, 8.6 or so. And that would be a pretty big earthquake. Obviously, that's a mega quake. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that region. It's got some activity stirring up down there. Whole lot of activity across this area of the world. That's a lot more than I've seen in a long time out here. Something's brewing. I think we all can agree on that. So we got the activity up north in Washington. And this is, our trimmer here. Let me see what we got for our trimmer, Cascadia trimmer. It's not listed today yet, even though, it shows today's date, but I think it's a little early. It should come out in about an hour or so. But yesterday's trimmer activity, a lot of movement up here into Oregon, a little bit in Northern California as well. This is trimmer activity occurring into the subduction zone. Not volcanic activity, but trimmer in general between the two plates as they slowly slide and slip past each other downstream, adding the strain here to the locked area offshore. Nothing going on up here across Seattle. I was thinking maybe something's going on here with the trimmer activity up here, but it's not. I think it's just a lot of strain in general across the Cascadia, more so across the southern end. But I've covered that a lot. Not going to go too much into that today. But we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Seattle Fault Zone, Cascadia, Northern California, a handful of earthquakes here. Stretching down, let's see, at 1.8. That's a fairly shallow earthquake there around the coast range of Northern California. 3.2 earlier this afternoon, back across the plate boundary. And just keeping an eye on that. It's been seismically active out here for a little while. A lot of trimmer activity here recently. The San Andreas Fault, pretty quiet aside from a couple smaller quakes down there. Got one earthquake out in the shear zone in between the San Andreas Fault and the Garlock Fault shear zone. Interesting when we always see earthquake activity out there because, it's an odd area here in terms of plate stress and accumulation. This area, I think, is more dynamic than and more related to the San Andreas Fault than what is believed. I believe this area could trigger one another in terms of larger earthquake activity. A lot of strain built up here from that shear zone southward. But for now, no big earthquake activity in Southern California. A couple smaller quakes there above 2.5 from early today. No major swarming going on there for now. Across Yellowstone, there was a little bit of earthquake activity out there this morning, if I remember right, around the Hebgen Lake Estates area. Some of this activity showing up as earthquakes in, this is a local earthquake there around the Hebgen Lake Estates, a 2.7, and then a 3.3 up here in Montana. That's a little bit more distant earthquake, but due to its size, it did show up on the majority of the seismograph stations out here. But this is specifically a local earthquake that struck over here around the Hebgen Lake Estates. And there's a handful of earthquakes showing up there in the small microquake range due to the stress out here in general across the western portion of the North American plate. A lot of strain builds up there, right? Due to the interaction of the plate boundary. It makes sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any strain out here. Wouldn't have these earthquakes. Texas oil fields still getting hit. Nothing going on across the New Madrid seismic zone there for now. Atlantic Ocean pretty quiet out there, not seeing anything major, but man, look at this area of the world. That is just a cluster of earthquakes. That's why I think something much bigger is about ready to happen out here somewhere. Because normally we don't see activity in this type of fashion out here, this amplified. And that's just the last 24 hours right there. Keep an eye there at Nankai Trough. I keep talking about it. It's probably going to happen, but it needs to be watched closely. Looks like I forgot to turn off the earthquake 3D bells. And that's funny because I've checked that a couple times too, and I didn't notice that. So the bells may have gone off a time or two, I'm guessing. All right, space weather activity. See what's going on here. We do have a fairly massive sunspot region out here, 3961, that has shown some complexity and growth out here in the last 24 hours. A little uncertain, though, on if it's going to continue to grow or get more complex or just maybe die off. But there is a chance here of some stronger flaring from this massive sunspot area. It's a little bit larger one than what we've seen in quite a while. So if it continues to grow and get unstable, we could see some stronger flaring from this area. Say goodbye there to 3964, just about ready to depart off on the western limb there. So 3961 is the area to watch right now. 20% chance for X flare, M flare at 65, C flare around 99% chance or so. No major roars in the forecast. Not a whole lot happening in that department. A quick glance here at the weather fire map here of Southern California. Well, let's see. There was a little small fire down here that got started around the San Diego area earlier called the Ted Williams fire. That looks like it could be under control here. Not showing any containment, but looks like everything's been canceled. But we do have the potential, obviously, with those strong damaging winds out here to see further fire starts around the Los Angeles area. Looks like a couple smaller ones out there. But fire has been knocked down. I don't see any restarts here across the Palisades fire. That's at 59% containment. No hot spots being observed there across the satellite. The Eaton fire here at 87% containment. Not seeing any further hot spots being observed out there. So hopefully these guys can get through the day here today. Well, they got a couple windy days in the forecast, Tuesday and even Wednesday as well, underneath some high winds out there. Very dry conditions prevailing there through Southern California. In fact, the entire West Coast out here looking at dry conditions. The current windy map out here, let's go ahead and bring this up real quick. See what we got. I just passed that. There's so many options here. It's unreal. Here's the winds. Fairly windy up there in the mountains there. It looks like 60 mile per hour wind gusts or so. That is expected through to continue through the evening into tomorrow as well. Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday even as well, getting some pretty windy conditions out there. So unfortunately, we don't have much to look forward to in terms of rainfall accumulation. There is a colder low pressure system that will be dropping down out of the north, bring in with it some cold but drier air out here. Maybe a little bit of shower activity, but normally that's systems that come down straight out of the north like that for us along the west coast are really not all that much of a precipitation maker, but we'll see what happens here. Looks like maybe some showers being reported there in Southern California as we head towards looks like next weekend, but no major I don't see any no major storms out here for California that would let me know that the storm door is open, and our storm door time period is getting short. If we don't get any rain in February either, it's going to be rough out here in the summer. All right, folks, I'm out of here. Stay safe out there. Keep an eye on a couple different areas. Obviously, we got some major unrest going on across various areas of the world. Seattle fault, you know, one may think, well, nothing's going to happen. We've seen this earthquake activity before, but you don't want to have that train of thought. You don't want to be scared either. You just want to be prepared. Make sure, you have an earthquake plan out here. Seattle not only has to deal with the Cascadia, but it's got its own fault system here that runs directly underneath it, similar to Los Angeles. In that area down there, the Puente Hills thrust fault had some earthquake activity out here back in 2024 when things were elevated. We had fours all over the place, and we started to see these other regions show uptick as well. Puente Hills thrust fault capable of producing a 7.5, and it's been 1,000-something years as well, maybe even longer than that, since they had a big one out here as well. So things are coming up on time periods when things should be getting a little bit more active out here. Just got to be prepared. So, all right, have a good one. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later. Stay safe out there and enjoy your Monday evening.